if you're Mickey D people, but the food crisis that's going on right now, and this engineer crisis. And we were just reasoning, looking at this particular art here. I had called it the Pharaoh knew not Joseph or Iusuf, but actually this could be also, if we judge from the Egyptology and the best Egyptological kind of records, you remember and it's interesting right now for Obama on a certain level. I don't know whether we have any Joseph Obama kind of slide right there, but of course we have this one right here. Now, some of us have said, and we asked the question ourselves: is Joseph or is Obama? In other words, is Obama a type of a Joseph? Most folks would say, well, we thought that actually, really, yes, we did. We hoped, right, that maybe Obama would be that sort of type of black man, even though, our gut feeling basically told us that there was a lot of hype, perhaps some substance, third world perspective, the Nish D'Souza, his Obama 2016 film. It's interesting, as we said in our review of the trailer and the other information and what we were able to pick up concerning the movie. That might be so. However, we don't want to hold our breath on that. But let's just take it like this. We're in this time when, similar to what was going on in Egypt, when they was asking about, they said the native pharaohs, like, correct me if I'm incorrect, Kamose, or Ahmose, or Kamose and Akamose and Kamose. These were the native pharaohs who were able to wrest the seat of power or government from what they call the Hyksos, or the Hyksos, or the Hyksos is what they call them, or the immigrants. In other words, the immigrants. In fact, Hyksos, people say, well, who were the Hyksos? Were the Hyksos just the Israelites? Were the Hyksos, who were the Hyksos? Some say, were the Hyksos just white or lighter, non-black Egyptians, original Egyptians, Ruti people? Or were the Hyksos, were they black peoples? And then you find out that actually the Hyksos were kind of almost like when we look at Hispanic people to a degree. We're not saying the Hyksos are Hispanic people. When we look at Hispanic people, we have the light-skinned Hispanics and the dark-skinned Hispanics. Like when we look at immigrants, we have those immigrants that love America and those immigrants that probably hate America but want to get what they want to get from America in that sense. So Hyksos, actually, the title Hyksos is not another way of saying Hebrew. It's not another way of saying Israelite. As many, even some of the half-Afrocentrics, even some of the Afrocentrics have kind of put across that idea that, like, the Hyksos were the Hebrews, or now we have some of the European Jewish scholars also saying that the Hyksos were the Hebrews, but the Hyksos were the immigrants, right? The Hyksos were the immigrants. It was a collective terminology by the native people for every other people who had, one way or the other, had come to Egypt and had become Egyptianized. Sound familiar? Like becoming American. They call it nationalized. You know what I'm saying? So we find that there were many, even in the Exodus out of Egypt, there wasn't just the Beta Israel. In fact, they said there was about 70 or 72 souls that were of the Beta Israel, because the Beta Israel were like the monarchy, so to speak, without it actually being a monarchy, of those who came out of Egypt, and then we have the Hebrews. Now, there's a lot of discussion about the Hebrews, and I have to get all into, some of the facts, some of the evidence, new data, some of our discoveries, and even some of the speculations concerning the Hebrews. But the Hebrews, we come to find that even from a biblical perspective, Abraham is called Hebrew. But in ancient Egypt, there was a priest that was known as Hebrei. In other words, the Hebrei of ancient Egypt would be the Hebrew. So when Abraham was called Hebrew, many people say, well, that is because he had crossed over the Tigris-Euphrates Valley. And well, who called him that? They said it was the Philistines or it was the Phoenician who had saw him crossing over. Now, that's interesting to name somebody who crosses a river. Now they get that name. Like it almost indicates, according to people who assume that's the meaning, it just says that when they observed Abraham crossing, they said, oh, there is Abraham the Hebrew. In fact, Abraham was a Hebrew before he even crossed that river. See, this is the thing you have to understand. What does Hebrew mean? One who crosses over. X marks the spot, right? One who crosses over from what? When we make the sign of the cross within so-called Orthodoxy and even Ethiopian Orthodoxy, what do we say? From high degrees to low, from heaven to earth, right? From heaven, from the forehead to the center of the chest to earth, right? From low degrees, from the left shoulder to high degrees to the right shoulder. Now, if you think about this on a cosmological and a very spiritual level, before we have the meskel and the sacrifice of the cross, from heaven to earth, the word came from what? From heaven to earth in the womb of Kedistin Gulmariam, right? And then from low degrees, that Jesus, the baby, right, he grew up, and even the Bible says that he grew up, right, and he excelled in wisdom, how he grew in wisdom. You know what I'm saying? This is where a lot of people who don't receive the true Salus Kedus, or the true teaching of the triune God, the Trinity, they find problem with us as Christian and elect Rastafari, who say that Jesus Christus is the Son of God and he was born of the Immaculate Conception. You know what I'm saying? What's called the Incan Yalelabet. In other words, it had no flaw, no fault. Because who was he born of? Right? And let's see if we can bring this up, right? Who was he born of? No, that's an eye trait, right? That's a picture right there. Let's move this. Let's shrink this down. Right? Let's shrink this down, and we can actually put that there. Oh no, that's Nibiru right there. We want to explain how this painting, I think, is Opio Productions. In fact, we might just touch on that. That is very interesting. Okay, that's the Kabbalah tree. Okay, that His Majesty hides his face. That's the Hosea prophecy right there. Let's go back to Nibiru right here, coming from Regalis, right? Coming from Regalis. Let's move this over. Okay, there we go. Let's see if we can get some of this out of the way. Okay, and there's Abba Kedus. Okay, so we have Iyasus. I just wanted to show the Haile Selassie commissioned painting of Kedistin Gulmariam again. Spiritually, I think that's why they had banned, put us on probation. They said, this is too hot. You understand? That is just too hot right there. You understand? Especially for the fact that we took out, the Antichrist on the cross. Now, some folks find us saying other Jews, but don't they view us as Beta Israel, as black Hebrews, to be other Jews, or even worse yet, not even to be Hebrews? right? But that's a whole other matter. What we want to really speak on here is the 7 cows and something that, what's his name, something that Alex Jones, right? Alex Jones said in this, I think, the food, what was it called, the World Food thing? What was the name of the vid? Just get the name of that vid in case anybody wanna follow up on this particular vid. The World Food Crisis Special Report. The World Food Crisis Special Report. And try to hold that page right there because there's the next link. Just want to check out where they said that how people, are the way they act are lower than animals. Remember the government told you about the what they call the zombie. What was it called? Zombie thing. The government zombies, but what it was called? Zombie alert, zombie alert, or something like that. They had some ring, there's some ring to that. So anyway, the whole thing about Obama and Joseph. Remember, we had asked the question previously. We had asked the question about, what is Obama kind of a Joseph? I mean, all the kind of pro-African leanings and so-called redistribution of the wealth, and some think, well, he's here to kind of like equal out the playing field, and many even, I got political eschatology, you understand, about Obama, and this is probably where this kind of comes from, although to some it might be somewhat mockingly and in the spoof. We put it there because it's interesting when we look at what's going on with this food crisis and this whole economic crisis. So this particular, the Egyptian, or the one on your left hand, some will say, well, this is the Pharaoh that knew not Joseph. We say, actually, this might be the Pharaoh, quote, unquote, or the Egyptianized, right, Hyksos, right, who actually had that vision of the 7 cows. In other words, the 7 lean years, or the 7 fat years first, and the lean years. And when we heard Alex Jones mention this in that, that World Food kind of crisis special report clip, and they're doing a whole, I guess, series right now, and some very important things that we would advise ones and ones. This is why we're seeking to get our Father's house in order. And we hope that all the brothers and sisters and those working with I, would recognize the utter importance of it. Now, there's a whole link between Joseph and what Joseph saw with the 7 lean years and 7 fat years. Let's bring up some of this Joseph iconography, some of it actually out of ancient Egypt. We call this one Yosef, right? Yosef or Iusif, right? Iusif, he was the Aten. Now, in ancient Egypt, they didn't, according to the scholars, they did not use the letter D. They didn't have the letter D. Instead of the letter D, they used the letter T. So in some words, for those scholars and researchers, when we see Aten is really the Aden, right? Which one spin of it could be Aden or Eden. The other spin of it is also the Adon, as in the Adon. So it's Aten, Aton, Aten, Aden, Aton, Adon, as the Adonai, the one whom the globalists, many of them, the majority are Luciferians, and they hate the Aten, right? They hate the Adon. They are seeking to destroy, and they have sought to destroy the African Aden, and that's why they're focused very much in the Gulf of Aden, all right? But this is Yosef or Joseph, right? The Iusif, he was the Aten or the Adon, the Adonai of Kemet, during this time that many of the scholars call the time where the non-native, that means the non-black or the Roma, the Aruti, and we have to get into ancient Egyptology. So when you look at the different races, the ones that were red, right, they were considered to be of the red soil, that rich top soil, which came down from Ethiopia, Tobia. Now, the man from E Foods, it's interesting because he didn't want to name where he was getting what country in the world he was getting his food from. Now, we're not saying that it had to be Ethiopia. You know what I'm saying? It could be other countries in South America, you know what I'm saying, as well. But then we brought up the article, right? We brought up the article, 7 fat cows and 7 starving, right? 7 starving cows. Oh, we just got right to it right there. So those who recognize what they're seeing. This is from February 28th, this article, 7 fat cows and 7 starving cows, wealth cycle, February 28th, 2009, 7 p.m. And it's a very, very interesting article. I don't know if this is the one that Alex Jones was speaking of, all right, but when we recognize, according to the reports, we're in the 7th year of a food crisis. Now, now don't look at it in the terms of just the 7 fat cows. The one who say, okay, there were 7 fat cows, and now there are 7, so these are the lean years for most people, right? This is the fat years. I mean, compared to what is to come, for most folks who are still sleeping or have had their IQ lowered by genetically engineered foods, all right, they'll think that these were the really lean years by comparison. I mean, even the point that Miste made, you made about, like, you know, you could go to McDonald's and the prices in McDonald's are really, really, you know, I mean, low by comparison to what they seem to have been many years ago. But then again, you have to recognize that many years ago, you was probably eating more real food per measure than you are eating today with what they discovered with all this engineering. Now look at this part of the world right here. You know this part of the world? You know what I'm saying? This is our promised land, people. You know, it just amazes me sometimes in our studying of the Torah portions that a lot of folks don't really get why that is so important, not just in a religious way, but in a real way. You know what I'm saying? Even in a real way, to come out, you know what I'm saying, to come out of this spiritual Egypt and to return to the promised land. Now, a lot of folks are talking about AFRICOM this, AFRICOM that. Those of us who have seen the code and the matrix on it, we know that Leviathan and the globalists will be ended in Africa. You know what I'm saying? Will be ended in Leviathan ends. It ends in Africa. In particular, it said Ethiopia, but we must also note that Ethiopia from ancient times was more than just what we see on the map as one small country. All right, let's just understand that. But now right here, you see this map. This is the source of the Nile floods. So the Nile waters depended, in other words, Egypt here. Now these are artificial borders. So this area was more Nubia. You know what I'm saying? It's when you look in the Egyptian, bring that up right here again. When you look like some of these people here, like they'll say this was a Nubian, right? This most likely is either a Ruti, but that one could also be a Shem or a Shemite, as they say, or he could also be an Egyptian. You know what I'm saying? Or a Kamite. You have to understand that right there. This is how Joseph was not known to his Hebrew or Shemitic, you know what I'm saying, brothers, if it were, but that whole terminology of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, we have to be very, very careful about that because that's a latter day. terminology. Now, some say that this was the Joseph type. He's being dressed right here. You understand? Some say that this is the scene right here, you know what I'm saying, where Joseph that we have in the Bible, where after Joseph was in the prison, he was a Bala Rai. He could read the parabolical, you understand, or the parable, the logic, the word of dreams. He was the interpreter of dreams, but it was much more than what people call today as a soothsayer. But albeit he was able to interpret dreams, and he had interpreted the dream, I think, of a butler and a cupbearer, all right? I think also a baker as well. He had interpreted their dreams, right? I think one lost their head, one was able to go to the palace, right? But he had forgotten about Joseph until the Pharaoh, right? Until the Pharaoh had a dream that none of his, let's call it his priest, his spiritual people, his occultic people, his religious folks, you know what I mean, his scholars and wise men, none of them could really interpret what was this about the 7 fat cows and the river and the Nile, the water, and there was the 7 lean cows. Now, for most of us, we'd be like, oh, come on, man. Even I know that. Well, you know that because, you know, somebody told you about the Bible or you heard it spoken before. You understand? Because otherwise, you'll know what time we're in right now. You know what I'm saying? If you know what time we're in right now, you should be preparing with like-minded people in this time for this time, but moreover for the time to come. So now, there's something very interesting in this. Now, some basically say that the 7 lean years or the 7 fat years and the 7 lean years are similar to what's going on right now in the economy. And I would say, see Alex Jones, see the particular show that we spoke about, the world food crisis. And there's a world food crisis. Most folks don't look at that part of the newspaper, you know what I'm saying? And most news shows tell you about some celebrity or some Kim Kardashian or somebody like Kanye West, you know what I'm saying? Or you know, some celebrity, or how's Beyonce's baby doing or something like that. And, you know, you're all into that. You'll talk about that. And that occupies your time. And you really don't recognize the signs, even the signs that you're able to see, even the earthly signs, much less the heavenly signs of the time. So here on this particular page right here, you see the Ethiopia region. Now, with what has happened recently in Ethiopia, this is very interesting. But then let's go a little further down on the map. Look down here. We have Uganda. We have Kenya. We have the United Republic of Tanzania. We have Rwanda and Burundi. I don't know if you can see this over here, but Rwanda and Burundi is right here. See how close to Ethiopia? See Uganda? See Kenya, where they say Obama, you know, fathers from. Some say he was maybe born there. You understand? And that is, you know, but remember what we said from the top of this. We said that the native Egyptians felt that during the time of the Hyksos occupation, they felt that the Hyksos, along with the Hebrews, since the Hebrews were immigrants, and the term Hyksos really referred to immigrants in latter times. So even though Shaus can be interpreted as shepherd kings or shepherding kings, but the Egyptians felt that these immigrants who had become Egyptianized, you understand, or educated in Egyptian mystery schools, now were stealing the country and stealing their wealth from them. This sounds like the Alex Jones crowd in a sense. And we're not saying that Alex Jones is wrong for saying that, you know what I'm saying, but we're just pointing out some of the deeper aspects of this as we look at what's going on in this present time. Like we said, we're probably going to like PDF this article right here and try to post it up on the page because some very, very interesting, like I said, like the Mississippi, the Rhine, the Danube, the Volga, the Yellow, the Mekong, and the Amazon rivers. This is one of this is one of the great continent-spanning rivers of the world. Speaking about the Nile River, right? This is one of the great continent-spanning rivers of the world. Remember we talked about the water wars? If you can check out that video, if it's still out there, go look it up. You understand? On the ILNet, Ethiopian World Net. The rainforests of Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya. So these three countries share this rainforest. They provide regular river flow. But the monsoon rains that come off of the westerlies, blowing off the warm Indian or Indian Ocean, are the cause of the annual flooding of the Nile. Now, it says that this has been terminated. This process, notice, has been terminated since the building of what's known as the Aswan Dam in Egypt. For many, many thousands of years, one of the chief agricultural grain-growing regions of the world are along the banks of this river as it winds throughout one of the driest deserts on earth. Across the earth, we are putting in dams and levees that prevent the annual floods, and therefore this is what will lead to droughts and famine. So we can see a lot of this is actually man-made, right? Probably satanically inspired, but man-made. We have been doing this for less than a century. So all these things are recent things, and bad effects of this are barely begun, right? Then it goes on to explain about the great cycles. It's a very, very interesting article, the 7 fat cows and the 7 starving cows. But let us just point out something that occurs, right? Something that occurs right here. Let's see if we can do this like this so we can see a little bit of the Pharaoh right there, right? The Pharaoh right there. Let's turn our Bibles for a moment, right? Now, they say like Obama, right? They say like Obama is like this Pharaoh. You understand? They said like he's a Pharaoh. And remember, the native people, they said he's not a real American. You know, that's been the whole thing, the birthers, right? But there's something to that birthers thing if we think about it. That's why the question is still out there. Is he a Joseph and we're not recognizing him? Some say, well, no, he's not, because they're looking at the racial or the physical or the flesh and blood. But we say, we don't really know what's in this man's spirit. You know what I'm saying? Whether he's really for us or against us, whether we really saw something when many was like, Obama, Obama, whether we were just hyping ourselves up. You know, but regardless of what it's like or what it will be, you know what I'm saying, we should be prepared and we should recognize and prepare just like the rest of them are prepared. You know, now, when we look right here in, now, as the author makes the point, right, the author is making the point right here. Let us move this over a little bit so we can be able to read this while you look at your president. Now, will he be the 2012 president? You know. Anyway, in Genesis chapter 41, it says, there were so many many of the aging ships that was discovered by divers are nearly always filled with both wine and oil products. So when they find the old Aegean ships, they almost always find that they're filled with wine and oil products. Almost remind me of Revelation where it says, hurt not the what? You know, what is it? Hurt not the wine, I think, and the oil. It speaks, hurt not the wine and the oil. Interesting. It's not just because people like to, you know, get drunk or, you know, have Eucharist or just, you know, fry up, you know, healthy organic foods, but there's a much deeper reality to it. So these were sent, it says, sent to Egypt. So the wine and the olive products from Greece or the Greece region, the Minoan region, were always sent to Egypt. So they even had this sort of, you know, product exchange right? They had this product exchange even back there, right? So let's go through this right here just for a moment, and let's see what they're saying. All right. So it says that Genesis chapter 41 in the Bible. It both happened at the end of 2 full years, right? It both happened at the end of 2 full years. Genesis 41 and 1. That Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. Behold, there came up out of the river 7 cattle, well-favored and fat-fleshed, and they fed in the reed grass, or the kana. They fed in the kana, like the kana bosa, the kana. That's what the reed is called, the kana, right? You understand? They fed in. I know one will talk about yam suf, all right, but we're speaking about the reed, the kana. Behold, 7 other cattle came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other cattle on the brink of the river. Verse 4, the ill-favored and lean-fleshed cattle ate up the 7 well-favored and fat cattle, so Pharaoh awoke. So Pharaoh awoke from his dream. Sounds like almost like the connection between, you know how they say, like, Obama, he speaks like Martin Luther King Jr., I Have a Dream, and then the whole monument that was dedicated. Kind of very, very interesting. Maybe someone else has another insight on that right there. But 41 and 25, skipping forward a couple of verses. So Joseph, right? Joseph, and what's interesting, this is a Joseph type right here. Let's call this Pharaoh for right now, for the sake of argument. All right? Can we just reason it? Come, let us reason together. Joseph, he said to Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. So these 2 parts is one. Underline. What God, Ha Elohim, is about to do, he has declared to Pharaoh, or Pharaoh. The 7 good cattle are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. The dream is one. Verse 27, the 7 lean and ill-favored cattle that came up after them are 7 years. And also the 7 empty heads of grain blasted with the east wind, they will be 7 years of famine. Interesting. If we read all the 7s, right? Now, therefore, let Pharaoh look for a discreet and wise man, and set him over the land of Egypt. You know who's saying this? It was Joseph. Joseph. You know, no one else could interpret the dream, right? No one else could interpret the dream of Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dream, right? No one else could interpret that particular dream. But it was Joseph, straight out of where? Where did Joseph come from? He came from prison. He came from the jailhouse. So, watch how you look down on folks who serve time in prison. In fact, Joseph served time in prison for alleged rape that he didn't even commit. I mean, if you accept the biblical as a Christian or a Jew perspective, we know that Joseph didn't do this. But yet, now, can you imagine what other people probably in Pharaoh's court thought? They're like, this, I'm about to say nigga, right? This guy, right? This guy here, this Hebrew guy, right? You remember what happened to Potiphar's wife? Yeah, she said he raped him. I mean that he raped her, right? And he was in jail serving time for a rape. Oh man, he should have got killed for that. What? Potiphar's wife? Can you imagine that? And after all Potiphar did for him, right? Now we know from the Hebraic side of it that it was all shimmy sham. You know what I'm saying? So see, this is why we have to really be, be careful how we respond to some of these things. Some things we will admit clearly that we don't really know. You know what I'm saying? But one thing we have to do, we recognize the signs, and this is what we have to, recognize and act off of. Now, in verse 34, Joseph goes on to say, let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint overseers over the land. Overseers, right? This is what the shaus, shepherd, kings, or in the Hebrew they're called the noges. It sounds like nugus. You understand? Actually, this was an Ethiopic institution. Remember, where it all began is it's all wrapping up. It's all wrapping up there. Now, here it says that, and take up the fifth part of the land of Egypt's produce in the 7 plenteous years. Take up the what? Take up the fifth part of the land of Egypt's produce in the 7 plenteous years. So a fifth. It's interesting when I hear that. Maybe I'm watching too much Alex Jones or whatever. It sounds like the fifth column. Sounds like the fifth column. You have the fourth estate, which is the media. Well, let's break it down. First, you have the tripartite government. What are you talking about? What we're talking about, you have the executive, you have the legislature, the legislative, and then you have the what? Judiciary. Right? Those are the 3 parts of Trinity, the 3 parts of government. And then what do you have added to that? You have the media. You know what I'm saying? You have the media, which is the fourth estate, right? Is the media. And then now you have what they call it, a fifth column. That means something outside of the 3 branches of government, the media, and the media is not just the news, but print and everything that basically now we have a little bit of access that they want to take away from us because we have the internet, as the former president would so poetically say. Now it says, let them gather, remember the fifth part now, let them gather all the food of these good years that come, right, of these good years that come, and lay up grain under the what? The hand of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. Let them keep it. This is all from the article, 7 Fat Cows and 7 Starving Cows, Wealth Cycles. You might be able to still find it out there. Maybe they've even updated it. This is from 2009 when we caught this article here. Now, the food, verse 36, the food will be for a store. For a what? A store, like a storehouse. Folks are hoarding up food, or not hoarding up, but basically storing up food. The government is hoarding up food, but a lot of people see what the government is doing, well, they're storing up food. Well, what are you doing? What are we doing? Who amongst us is able to store up food? You know what I'm saying? Real good food, like the E-foods? Like the E-foods, you check that out. All right? The food will be a store to the land against the 7 years of famine. The food that's stored up, it will be a what? It will be a store to the land, right? Against the 7 years of famine, which will be in the land of Egypt, that the land not perish through the famine, right? That the land will not perish through the famine. It's interesting when you talk about the famine even in Ethiopia. And, there was enough food in Ethiopia to feed them, but it was certain merchants and others. And we have the data. We've actually seen the evidence on this. Some of it, we have that evidence that there was actually enough food in Ethiopia. But, it's similar to what's going on and beginning to go on. So it's really kind of interesting. But let's just go forward in this right here. Verse 37 says that the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh. You understand? Pharaoh thought, hey, that's good. And in the eyes of all his servants, right? All his servants. Now, many of the Afrocentrics and even the Egyptologists say that this most likely was during the Hyksos time, when the non-native people, You understand? You know, all those people like today would be the ones who can't really say I was born in the USA. You know what I mean? Like that guy who seemed to be having certain mental problems or psychological problems. But verse 38 says that Pharaoh, right, and he's from Jersey, right? Anyway, Pharaoh said to his servants, he said to his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is, notice that, the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Elohim. Now understand how, well, this is Pharaoh of Egypt, but he's testifying, right? The Spirit of what? The Netaru, the Intaru. You understand? No, the Netaru. You understand the singularity? Verse 39, it says that Pharaoh said to Joseph, because the Netaru, they say Netaru or Elohim. We have Elohim. But then in Egypt, they have the Netaru or the Intaru, right? Or, okay, it says, because Elohim has shown you all of this, there is none so discreet, you know, that can keep a secret, discreet and wise, right, as you. Verse 40, you shall be over what? My house. And according to what? Your word. Will all my people be ruled? It's like people wonder, like, what is up with this Obama? How come don't the globalists know? You know, and on the Alex Jones show, he had that Dinesh D'Souza. It's an interesting interview. You might have already seen it. Check it out if you can. I don't know if you can check out the film, but check that out. Can't wait till it gets to DVD. And somebody's probably bootlegging it. Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. But it says, only in the throne I will be greater than you. It's interesting when they say, like, Obama, he has, like, bloodline links with the Queen of England, and now they're in this whole Q3. Google it, Q3, or check out Prison Planet and stuff, because it's a prison planet. Now, Pharaoh says in 41:41 of Genesis, Pharaoh said to Joseph, behold, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand and arrayed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. So, brothers, don't feel no way, with that gold chain. I mean, just in principle, it's a very Hebrew thing and a very African thing and a very biblical thing on that sort of level. And that's not really a custom that really, even when you see the so-called royalists and the Europeans and the rest of them, they be wearing these chains and stuff. They got that from the black nobility, because it's not a very European thing to do. You don't see country boy do that unless he's hanging out with some, some negresses, as it was, some kings, in other words. So he put a gold chain about his neck. When we're reading in Proverbs, it speaks about the rightful order for the bling-bling, actually. But 41 and 43 says, and he made him to ride in the second chariot. It sounds like when they be having these diplomats and dignitaries, you ride in the second. It seems like, even though this is in the Bible, it still has a very modern ring to it, right? And in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, Abrek, well, actually, Abrek goes to ancient Egypt, but the translation provided is bow the knee. You understand? Like ten barkaku. Abrek, ten barkaku. And the Abrek is coming, so ten barkaku. You understand? Bow the knee, bow the knee. He set him over all the land of Egypt. Now Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without you shall no man lift up his hand or his foot in all the land of Egypt. So Pharaoh put all of this authority in Joseph, in the Hebrew, right? Now Joseph laid up grain as the sand of the sea, very much, until he stopped counting, for it was without number. In other words, he laid up so much grain, and then, like their calculator said, hey, I mean, it's beyond this number here. You understand? They reached a certain number, but he said without number. Now, the 7 years of plenty that was in the land of Egypt came to its end. The 7 years of famine began. And see, it's interesting, because there have been food crisis and food drought. You understand? But still, by comparison, it might be seen as plenty. But notice the language here. The 7 years of famine began. It began to come. Just as Joseph had said. Just like Joseph had said. In other words, there will be a redistribution of the wealth. But hold on, wait for it. There was famine in all lands. So what we're getting at this particular time is a kind of a crisis that's almost global. Now, here's what's interesting. Here's what's very interesting. Could it be that Nibiru, the black star, the Passover comet, had passed over? Of course, the Egyptian priests would have looked at Nibiru, right, as the Hathor comet. But from the Hebrew perspective, you understand, they would look at that as the destroyer. You know what I'm saying? The destroyer, in the sense like the destroyer of worlds. And the real destroyer of worlds, not the one Oppenheimer, quoting Shiva, was talking about. But there was famine in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. So there was a famine in all lands, but in the land of Egypt, right, there was bread. They said America used to be like that. Some say not so much anymore. But verse 55 says, when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. So notice, when all the land of Egypt was famished, remember they had bread up. Pharaoh didn't say, all right, you need some bread? You're getting kind of lean there. I'll give you some bread. But notice the language, verse 55, Genesis 41:55. This is about the 7 fat cows and the 7 starving cows, right? And Joseph, the kind of whole Obama link right now, the 2012, what's going on with the world food crisis and the wars, rumors of wars, 2012, the Beirut, and all of this kind of stuff. Looking at all of this as being like we have been here before to some extent. So it says that when the people cried, they had to shout for bread. It's like the zombie, what do you call it? the zombies, in other words, the people have become almost, so, they cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, notice it doesn't say he said to all his people. He said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. And it was go to my man right here, go to Joseph. Right? Only the New World Order says, go to Obama. Right? What he says to you, do. What he says to you, you just do it. All countries came to Egypt. All countries. You understand? All these other countries, they did what? They came to Egypt because the famine was severe in all the earth. And on this particular Alex Jones, on the Alex Jones show, they kind of touch on that. Now look over here. Look over here. Here's a satellite photo of the region of Giza, the Agazi Plateau in Egypt, in the Kapata, the Gubit, right? The land of Gub. You understand? The land of Gub. Some say Geb, but really Gub, right? You see what's circled right there is the pyramids of Giza. Now you notice the dry desert. You see how dry that desert? Do you see the contrast right here? This is dry desert. This is the 3 pyramids or Orion's belt, right? This is some green over here. But you see this look, here's a little green over here too. Here's a little less green over here. You see how dry this is? Some places, even in America, is becoming that bone dry. Bone dry. Anyway, the very ancient Egyptian people were extremely intelligent. Thank you very much. The ancient Egyptian people, and we're speaking about our ancestors, or those who claim their origins were from the Tobia or from Ethiopia, right? So they were extremely intelligent. They figured out very early on, say around, some say 15,000 years ago. What? You thought 6,000 years? No, that was just the person who got up at that 6,000 year point, right? But 15,000 years ago, if not, it was much earlier. And many of us really think, based on the evidence that keeps, verifying itself, it was much earlier. Bodies buried in the extremely dry desert sands would naturally mummify. So they recognized that if they buried people over here, these people would naturally mummify. You know what I'm saying? And basically almost be preserved, and thus they would not rot away, right? So it was a kind of natural embalming. In the Americas, burials of important people were often hauled, of very important people in the Americas. And actually, Amorica is one of the ancient names of America before the European and, the Europeans from England and other parts of Europe came over here. Amorica. It's interesting because Amora, in the Bamarinya, in the Amharic, the Ethiopic, is a vulture. And Yeshua HaMashiach, our Black Lord and Savior, he says that in that day and time, that wherever the carcass is, right, wherever the dead body is, there will be gathered the vultures. All right. In the America, burials of important people were often hauled into drier parts of the desert and buried there too for the very same reason. Now, but why is it so important? Well, we're going to kind of go over, just pass over some of this right now, right? Pass over some of this. This is all some of the history of ancient Egypt, so forth and so on, right? Some of the history of some of the rulers, and we did a couple of vids on the fakeries, the King Tut fakes. You see how they broke off the nose right here so they could say, oh, it's not a black person, even though it looks like a black person. You're over saying, or Asiatic black man, right? Now, many Bible believers, right? Many of the Bible believers, they use archaeology, right? They like to use the archaeology, where things are, to find out and to locate their favorite myths. I like this one. No, I like that one. This is easy to do in some ways. For example, the chances, right? The chances of the horse or the cow, the sheep people invading agricultural Egypt was always high. It was always high that the people who had horses, the people who had cows, the people who had sheep, invading that. See, what Egypt had was agriculture, right, from that rich topsoil that came from Ethiopia, right? So it says, and sure enough, they have succeeded in this. The 1630 to 1520 century of invasions of the horse people, right, who were sometimes known also as the Hyksos, is associated with the Genesis story of Joseph and the dream, right? Now, some say that there's a lunacy to this right here. Perhaps I'm not going to get into all of this. A lunacy. We're about to go through our Lunar New Year, right? I was just talking to a brother about that whole lunar thing. That whole lunar thing. It's kind of interesting and really like, well, we're not going to go into it right now. It's kind of a little joke, but it's kind of for mature people, about the moon's effect on the woman, and then, with the monthly, and then the man, because he can't get none, he kind of goes crazy like a lunatic, so forth and so on. So maybe that's probably one of the ways, when you just keep it real, because the moon has effect on the waters, but it's the sun, that light shines on the moon, and the difference between the Ethiopian New Year, that was on September 11th, as usual, except for leap years, which was last year, but for you all in the West, it's this year. And then the 7 days now to the Jewish or the lunar New Year. But the lunacy, some say the whole story is obvious at first glance, or at a glance. And what's the lunacy? If most people, including many of the Jews, believe that this story is historical and happened in 1500 BC, then it is really stupid, the writer says, because the pharaohs of Egypt have been taxing the farm people for at least 2,000 plus years before this story was supposed to happen, right? In other words, why would a pharaoh and his wisest priests be stumped by such an obvious dream? It seems obvious, doesn't it? This would beg a level of, the writer says, stupidity greater than what we see today in the center of our modern so-called banking/economic systems. Ha, 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 right? Actually, as a 7-year-old, I was puzzled as to why it was so difficult to figure out the dream riddle. It seemed childishly simple to me back then, as it was. The Jews, or the Hebrews, who descended from wandering, herding tribes, probably found the ancient Egyptian system of water allocation, land use rules, tithing systems, and storage to be utterly miraculous. Well, but of course, and it came from Ethiopia. Now let's understand, let's connect it to the root. Let's get to the root of the tree. Instead of giving credit for inventing all of this civilization, they say that the Jews or the Hebrews needed to pretend that the clever Egyptians who built immense public structures, water systems, field systems, and the art of writing, etc., were too stupid to figure out taxes, says the writer, right? This is what the 7 fatted cows are all about. You know what it's all about? It's about taxes. Not Texas. We didn't say Texas. We say it's all about taxes. This is what the 7 fatted cows are all about. That is, during good times, there's what they call a surtax has to be applied so that a surplus can accumulate and be stored. You can bet the very first farmers in Egypt thought about how to do this. Accumulating grain means protecting it from rodents, water, and human theft. This meant having guards, storehouses, and cats. You see why these things were important in ancient Egypt? All right? And sure and true enough, the very first people to domesticate cats were ancient Egyptians. Actually, they were Ethiopians. You understand? And the Egyptians credit their civilization, Osiris, Osar, or Set, to being Ethiopians who came down the Nile to civilize them. Now, let's just recognize that right there, right? Or the Ruti people. Now, guarding the surplus grain, it meant having someone in charge of the storehouses. And this was the job of the pharaohs and their priests. Now, this is also why cats were elevated into some god or goddess status. If they were the big cats, gods. If they were the smaller cats, the goddesshood, right, by ancient Egyptians. Right? Now, of course, the shepherding tribes from the Middle East, let's just say, they didn't quite understand all of this. Like the modern Egyptians, so-called pseudo-Egyptians, don't really understand that the Egyptians that they be displaying, you understand, and counterfeiting are black or African. I think they understand that. But the Middle East tribes, they didn't understand all of this, which is why there's no mention, some say, of cats in the Old Testament. Let's clarify. There's no mention of cats within the King James version of the Old Testament. Shalom, Rastafari. This is the second part of this. We're talking about the 7 fatted cows and the 7 starving cows. We're talking about wealth cycles. We're talking about the real meaning, you understand, behind this parable that we have in the first book of the Bible, Genesis. And we're speaking about the connection, right, as we have right here, the connection, you understand, with this present time and this global world food crisis in 2012. All right? Now, we're going to try to tie all this together, but first let's get through the 7 fat cows and the 7 starving cows, and we give some credit to Alex Jones in his World Food Crisis special report with the founder of the eFoods, and I'll say check it out for yourself, brothers and sisters. Go on the YouTube, check it out. World Food Crisis special report on the Alex Jones Prison Planet channel. All right, so you can recognize what the media, the fourth estate, is not really telling you. All right, and don't think because you can get, that the Big Mac prices have not gone up. In fact, years ago it was more expensive, Big Mac, McDonald's, and these things, because it was more real beef. Like that was a joke. Because the joke was on everybody, show me the beef. You understand? Now you think you're getting beef, but you're getting some cleverly, genetically engineered, some cleverly, genetically engineered food or pseudo food, which is not food at all. But we are left off on cats, right? On cats in the Bible. And this writer here says that when they were young, they doubted the entire story about Egypt due to the fact that no one in the Jewish version of history mentions cats, despite supposedly being there and assimilated for generations. They didn't know about cats. You understand? When they say cats are basically, then it breaks down cats right here. You understand? So for all the cat people, maybe we should open up a picture of some cats right here. Let's see if we have some pictures of some cats right here. Just for the cat people. What is it? Pashed or bashed? It's interesting that when you look in ancient Egypt, right? And let's see if we have any quick pictures of cats right here. All right, cats right here. But it's very, very interesting how all of this begins to really overlap. Really overlap more and more. Okay, here's ancient Egypt, mummification. Let's see what we have here. I hope it brings up that one where it's a cat that's cutting the head of the. There we go. Which one? We can actually take either or. Cats, right? Oh, there's too many images. All right, so something has to. You understand? His Majesty covers his face. Okay, we have that one right there. We shall. Let's save this one right here. Give you a little quick and unavoidable insight into our drive right here. Let's see. We'll take that one out as well. Come forward to that. It's another half of the story. Let's get cats. So this is the second part of the 7 cows. So we have cats. All right, we have cats. Now, remember we spoke about there's a hidden matrix in the Revised Amharic Bible and His Majesty's Metaf Kedus in the Psalms, where it speaks about Leviathan, you understand, being cut into pieces in Ethiopia, by extension Africa. That is true. You understand? So this is why when we talk about Africom and all these things, fret not thyself. You understand? Fret not thyself. Dwell in the land and be fed. You understand? Now, the cats, right? The cat right here. Let's bring this up a little higher up here. The cat, right, is known as the Felis sylvestris catus, right? Known in ancient Egypt as mew, as mew, played a large role in ancient Egyptian society, because now we know that it protected the grain from rats, from rodents. All right, this is why it played such a large role in ancient Egyptian society. Now, beginning right as a wild or untamed species, right? Yaltegara or Garach, right? You know, one that was not tame, it became Tegarach, right, or tame. Now, cats were useful in keeping down vermin. Cats were useful in keeping down vermin populations in the Egyptians' crops and harvest. Now, if we understand the nature of cats, even from this above ancient Egyptian hieroglyph, we might be able to understand why in the so-called modern European and the Jewish version, cats, you know what I'm saying? Because the reptilians, or cats, are a natural enemy to the reptilians. Now, we have the small cat and the rodents, and the rodent is like actually is like a snake in a sense, but I don't even go into that right now. All right. So we have the Lion of Judah. You understand? Shall break every chain, and as Christ says that your worship that which you know not, we know what we worship. For salvation is of Moa Andesa in Negeda Yehuda, of Yehuda, or of the Ayhud, of the Judahites, the black Jews, or in your Bibles, the Jews. Right? Now, cats were useful for keeping down vermin populations in Egyptian crops and harvests. Now, through exposure to humans, right, through being exposed to humans, the cat population became domesticated over time and learned to coexist with human populations. I don't know, we got a cat that basically we're just trying to tame that cat. It's like it's not used to human populations. The people inhabiting the area, which would later become unified and known as Upper and Lower Egypt, they had a religion or a religious system that centered around, some say, from modern Egyptology, we dispute this until like the later times when the other nations came in, but they say worship of the animals. In other words, we say it's more a worship. They understood the role that animals played in the ecology, unlike this modern end-time Gentile civilization, by and large, of which the cats became one. Now, originally praised for its aid to humans in controlling vermin, its ability to fight and kill snakes, even ones such as cobras, the domesticated cat slowly became a symbol, get this, of, guess what, of grace. We've been speaking on grace and poise. Now, the goddess, they say, they call it goddess, but actually we say feminine attribute of the singularity or the one true God, Mafdet, right? The feminine principle, we can say. There was a deification of justice and execution, as you see in the above image by the tree. See the tree, right? You see we call it the Ormo tree. You understand? You see the cat, right? You see the snake. You see what happens to the snake? So let them come in. You understand? They shall come in and they shall be fertilizer, right? The deification of justice and execution was a fierce lion-headed goddess, right? And some say Sekhmet, the latter production of it. Now, the cat goddess, or Bast, or Pasht, right, or in the Hebrew it's known as Boshet. So people say it's not there, but it is there. In the Hebrew it's known as, there's a man named Ishbosheth. You know what I'm saying? But within the Hebraic, that aspect, that attribute took on the idea like if a man is a cat goddess, he is effeminate. So another way of saying even homosexual within that context, when we look in the Hebrew, and Ishbosheth, in other words, he was a feminine, not so much even homosexual as we call homosexual today, but he was not a man. He did not man up. He was not under the male lion, but was under the female cat goddess. You understand? Like they call this thing fag hags or so forth and so on. Right? Now, also known as Bastet, right, eventually replaced the cult of Mafdet, which was the older one. And Bast's image softened over time, and she became the deity or the principle representing protection, fertility, and motherhood. Maybe this is why we began off with Haile Selassie's Black Madonna. Because of her instincts of protection, right? Now, as a revered animal and one of the very important to ancient Egyptian, can we say Black Kemet society and religion or spirituality, right, or living faith, Hymenautes, the cat was afforded the same mummification after death as humans. Now, mummified cats were given an offering to Bast. And in 1888, an Egyptian farmer accidentally uncovered a large tomb containing tens of thousands of mummified cats and kittens. This discovery outside of the town of Beni Hassan, or the son of the beautiful, or child of the beautiful, right? Beautiful child, contained around 80,000 cat mummies dating back to approximately 1000 to 2000 BCE. And now here, let's see if we can stretch this right here so you can see this a little more clear. All right, a little more clear. Let's just zoom this in a little bit. Let's see where are we at. There we go, right there. So this is a large symbology of it. All right. Now, many people get the wrong interpretation because of a Gentile, white Western disorientation. Right, a disorientation. All right. So this was her right here. One imagery. Right, and let's bring this out a little bit. All right, let's see if it's still within reading range. Let's bring this out to 125, right? So indeed, one of the most favored goddesses of the household was Bast. One of the favorite imabates, in other words, right? Now, museums have always, museums today have many cute representations of this extremely popular goddess. Often she carries a basket and has bracelets and earrings. She was always a civilized goddess, or represented a civilized female, very domestic. You know what I'm saying? Like the Imabate, right? The Imabate. So in ancient times, this was a symbol of the Imabate, but not for the worship reasons that we have in a Gentile white Western disorientation, but from the real reasons that we have been laying out right here. Now, the fact that the writers of Genesis make no mention of her is a sign, the author says. They were telling fairy tales passed from hand to hand. No, really, the fairy tales we have are from King James and are from boisterous white supremacy. That's where we get the fairy tales from. You know what I'm saying? That says that black is bad and white is good. Now, what is also a sign of, they say, dishonesty is the inability to name the clueless pharaoh, right, in the story. Well, Gerald Macy really points out, you know what I'm saying, what this story really was representing, you know what I'm saying, was representing right here. But let's just listen to the author for a little moment more, right? They say that even in Ur, where Abraham was supposed to come from. The city officials knew all about storage of grain and how to tax people. Indeed, one of the earliest signs of any city-state is the institution of what we call the gubber, you know what I'm saying, the taxation, the gubber system, you know what I'm saying, which is our Ethiopic system, you know what I'm saying, if we would understand, all right? It connects also with the shoftim, as we discussed briefly in our previous Torah portion. Now, to this day, we see people denying the utility of taxes and the need for civic organizations to tax properly and spend carefully. The U.S., it says right here, the U.S. stands, right, as a perfect example of this. We hate taxes, or Americans, they hate taxes and have had half a century of tax revolts that had only one outcome. The more the Americans revolt against taxes, the more the bankers, a.k.a. the priests, you understand, the bankers are the modern priests, enable us to borrow more money, so we are now in a perpetual debt flow. America is in a perpetual debt flow. The debt is flowing, right? Which in bad times leads Americans, right, to destruction. And this is where we're at with this whole global economy. Now, the author says that the Jews who wrote, we say the Jews who rewrote the original Ethiopic Genesis, they acted as if the very developed kingdom of the pharaohs didn't know about taxes until they say a Jewish guy, but until Joseph figured it out. Here's what happens next according to the Jewish version, the version that we have today in its white Western Gentile mistranslation of events goes like this, all right? And there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money, right, that was found in the land of Egypt, and he redistributed the wealth. No. And in the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house, right, into Pharaoh's house, and to his priests, the bankers, right? And when money failed, right, now we hear about hyperinflation and they're printing more money, or they're issuing more money than is really, so it's lowering the value, the spending power, right? And when money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, or the Canaanu, all the Githawiyan, the Egyptians, came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth." And Joseph said, "Give your cattle, and I will give for you for your cattle, and I will give for your cattle if money fail." He said, "Now, give me your cattle." Right? He said, "Give me your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle if the money fail." You understand the money fail? You understand? But know what Joseph said? Joseph said, "If the money fail." Right? If the money fail. Aha! Now we have a most interesting thing here. We know from ancient records that the storage of grains was for bad times. And during that time, to prevent riots, revolutions, and the toppling of regimes, or that would be governments, the rulers, the archons, would hand out bread rations during bad times. So now they're telling you that you can get food stamps even if you got a car and a bank account, so forth and so on. Because, you know, what happens when there's a crisis? Because already laws, executive orders that already have been issued. This was a smart survival move, right? Now, one say, well, is Obama really a Joseph? If he is, for who? That's our question still. We would love if he is really our brother and he's a Joseph for us. You understand? But it's really too early in the game to tell. when the British allowed 1/3 of Ireland, to die of starvation during the Great Potato Famine, this was due to a desire to see the population of Catholic Irish natives, the natives, you understand? Those who say, I was born in the USA, right? The natives greatly reduced, right? The natives greatly reduced. Then the occupation of Ireland would be much easier for the invading British troops. This was, in other words, a hostile move, right, to destroy a population, but a particular enemy population. All right? So all you haters out there of your president. Just think about it for a moment. Now, 1/3 dead and 1/3 forced to flee to distant lands suited the British crown just fine. So 1/3 is dead and 1/3 are forced to flee. They say the immigrants aren't coming over here so much anymore. You understand? Some of them might think, hey, go into the other homegrown businesses since America is supplying them. You know, what they call that thing? Fast and Furious, right? But the pharaohs of Egypt did not want their peasants dead, did they? They wanted them alive so they could farm in the future and grow more crops and build more stuff for the rulers. I suspect that many public projects were done in bad years, like in America, right? And the workers were paid in bread. So you know, and they already have these conscription orders too, where they can just conscript people if a crisis happens. People say, I ain't gonna work for no government just for bread. Yeah, yeah, I hear you. Bad years were also times of raising large armies. Bad years to do two things, right? Bad years. Remember, we got this really bad kind of terrorism thing. You see what's going on? The embassies, they killed the ambassador. You understand? To protect the farmlands from hungry, marauding, hurting people like the Israelis, the Israelites, or the Hebrews, the Hebrei, or the Hyksos of yore, right? Usually, when the raids fail, the herders become extremely aggressive. All right. The author guesses also that the earliest Egyptian rulers from before the Old Kingdom figured this out. But in the Jewish rendition, or what we have as the modern rendition in the Bible, and the way that it's taught to us, the way it's interpreted, you see, because that can be interpreted even from the King James in a different way from this popular interpretation, but this is how it's been interpreted in Bible schools and different denominations, you understand, of counterfeit Christianity and so forth and so on. But in this Jewish rendition of the discovery of taxes, the Jewish advisor, Joseph, right, who was second in command. He is second in command. Because remember, America really is second in command. Mother, England, London, bankers, priest, and daughter, America, the virgin daughter. I don't know how long that's going to be, but the virgin daughter. It's like she's about to get, but anyway, according to this story, was ruthless. He demanded money for these stored grains, which were actually, notice, collected taxes. Or he demanded the cattle, which was like money. So now, normally when a ruler has a second in command who does this in a time of privation, right, we see an increase in crime. Isn't that what we're saying? What about Chicago, Obama's hometown, right? Riots. Are we seeing riots around the world? Insurrections. So people wonder, why do people just beginning? Because they're hungry. America had to cut. You don't listen to the BBC News, and you don't check out Alex Jones' show and stuff like that. They was talking about how America had to cut the exports of food to these other countries because, the economy is really bad. You know what I'm saying? That's what the bankers say. The priests say that, right? The Kemerim, the ones who wear black. So, according to this 1,000-year story, old story, 1,000 years old story. Joseph helped the Pharaoh to suck up all of the money or suck up all the valuable. You know what I'm saying? Like right now people are selling their gold and stuff like that so they can go shopping at Walmart and things like that. You know, they're getting rid of that stuff. You know, why I need gold? I need some food. Remember how important food is, right? Let's agree on the culture, agriculture. So, which they hoarded. So Pharaoh and Joseph, according to this story and this interpretation, they hoarded it. And there was no more commerce. You do know what commerce is, right? Commerce is simple. You don't have to go to business school. Commerce is like this. All right, I got this, right? Just call this whatever you want to say. We call it kana. You know what I mean? Say I got some kana, right? And you got some wuha, which is like water, right? In Ethiopic, right? And I say I'll give you this kana for this water, right? And you say you will give me that kana for my wuha, right? And I said yes. And we have another witness right here. And he said, hey, sounds like a good deal to me. Right? And so we exchanged that. See, we didn't have to go to no government. We didn't have to pay a portion to the government or whatnot. This is how people say, oh, that's the barter system. That's commerce, you idiot. That's commerce. You understand that? I mean, commerce, you understand, we could have said if there was money. You could have said, well, you have that kana and I have this shekel. You understand? I'll give you this many shekels for that much kana, and we can, you know, somebody's watching and say, hey, that seems like a good deal right there, you know, and it's open, it's in the mercato or the geviya, it's in the marketplace, and we exchange that like that. So it wasn't really barter right there, it was like a sale. You could call it a sale, but it might not have been a sale like on deal because we don't really use coupons. You know what I'm saying? We don't really understand that in our commerce. So the Jewish advisor, right, the Hebrew advisor, had a neat idea. You know, really, if we put it in perspective, the black Hebrew, we have a black president. They keep talking about he's not a native. He's not really American. Doesn't these two stories sound a lot alike in some strange way or something like that, right? They say he's from Kenya? Okay, so he had a neat idea. Force the Egyptian people and others, you understand, who were maybe nationalized Egyptians, they walk like an Egyptian, you know what I mean, to hand over all of their wealth. You understand? We're talking about wealth cycles now. Hand over all of their wealth, right, in the form of their livestock, cattle, goat, sheep, etc., right? Well, Gobetz, right, according to this story, right, his own tribe was starving and wanted grain. So they came to Egypt for it, his own tribe, his own peeps, right? And so they say that Obama is an African. So does it mean that his people can come here? We don't know. I haven't seen it. I don't know if it's happening, right? So they came to Egypt for it. Now, the author says, let's be realistic. A bunch of desert herding people, right? A lot of African desert herding people, I mean, don't say it like that, with a very violent history. Yeah, well, you know, it's that part of the world, it's that kind of neighborhood, you know? And obviously bad tempers. I mean, if you was, you know, have one meal every couple of days or whatnot, you would have a little bad temper too. I mean, you know, Bob Marley says, and you see in the Nolly movies, that a hungry man is an angry man, right? So they had bad tempers, and they came pouring into Egypt doing what? Looking for food. They were looking for food. We know you got food here. You got all of these fast food shops and food here, and always talking about food, all these food shows and cooking shows and stuff like that. Y'all must got food. Y'all like food. Y'all got food to experiment on a cooking technique or something that looks totally nasty. You understand? So they came looking for food. The very people the pharaohs feared and hated. Well, let me clarify for the author. The very people that the native pharaohs, but it seemed like the native pharaohs, like the Native Americans, talking about the ones who come from Europe and England and all of that, that talk about they have blood that been here since 1830 and 1820 and stuff like that, right? These are the kind of people that they feared and hated. That's why they never really had immigration for Africans, not even for Haitians, like they have for all kinds of European people. But they say that it's for everybody. I mean, I don't know if it's everybody European, but now things seem to change a little bit. But they say there's too many immigrants. People say Obama hasn't done enough on immigrants. We're saying the people that the Native American rulers, feared and hate. Now, yes, this does sound now like a Hyksos, right? Like an immigrant invasion. They say immigrants are coming from. They never talk about the European ones who are all in the media and stuff, but they talk about immigrants are coming from Mexico, even though they pay taxes. They're not really, Americans or whatnot. They said the immigrants are coming from like Africa. They don't talk too much about the Indian and the Asian. So much immigrants like Dinesh, the Souza, but they always seem to have a problem. You ever wonder how some peoples always seem to get together? You understand? Always against these other peoples, you know what I mean? And it seems to go even way back in history. So understand what is going on here. They say that Obama and his people were immigrants. Just a little bit more of this, brothers and sisters. It says, and they brought their cattle to Joseph. Okay, now we're seeing something. And Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses and for the flocks, and for the cattle of the herds, and for the asses. That's on the booty, not booty like in war, but it's basically talking about the donkeys, right? The jackasses, right? Not the Democrats, but the donkeys, right? And he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year. When the year was ended, they came to him the second year, right? And said to him, we will not hide it from my Lord. Hide what? What they trying to hide? How that our money is spent. Money is spent. So why you come to me? My Lord, they said, right? The native people, born in the USA since 1830, my Lord, right? Also has our herds of cattle. And there is not aught. That means like naught. That means like nothing, right? There's nothing left in the sight of my Lord but our bodies. They only have their bodies, right? And our lands. So they had something. They had bodies and land, right? They had land. A lot of us be in apartments and renting a room, renting an apartment. These guys had some land and stuff. So they're coming to Joseph, man. They're coming not to the G, but to the J, right? And so what did Joseph say? Or what happened? They go on. They keep talking. They said, wherefore shall we die before thy eyes? Like, this is like saying that you don't want us to die, before your eyes. I wish I could see Joseph's face. Whether he had a face like that right there, I don't know. But it's like, both we and our land. The land is going to die, right? He says, by us. They said they came now because they were still starving. Now notice this world food crisis, and this is why folks are like storing up food and hoarding up food and buying guns and getting water and getting purifiers and stuff like that. And while some people are still going and saying they're getting a great deal at Walmart, listen, folks. I need to prepare. So it's a Beta Rastafari, wherever we're at. This is why check out the UCC now. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about the Universal Churchical Code. Anyway, let's go on. So now these native Egyptians, now in the sense of today, it'll be Native Americans, ones who figure that like they've been here ever since the country was established, right? It says, buy us and our land for bread. What do they want? Wonder bread? What's up? And we in our land will be servants to Pharaoh. Remember we talking about these work conscription orders and stuff like that? And give us seed, right, that we may live and die not. In other words, give us something. They needed seed to, like Monsanto. You heard about that World Seed Bank, where they're collecting all the seeds and taking them way up there to some like Nordic land, and they have it like totally armed and stuff like that. But these are like the the genetically modified, like the real, what do they call it, treasure, heritage seeds, that's what they call it, that the land be not desolate. And Joseph bought. Joseph, he saw a good deal when he saw it, right? Brother Joseph, what did he do? He bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. Not for myself, this is for Pharaoh. You understand? Pharaoh. For the Egyptians sold every man his field. They sold every man his field because the famine prevailed over them. The famine prevailed over them, so the land became Pharaoh's. Interesting. And as for the people, he removed them to cities. Doesn't it sound like what they've been doing with folks? Like even what happened with black folks who got a piece of land and everything, they moved them up to cities and to ghettos. And now in the redistribution of wealth, you understand, it seems like that goes on kind of too. And we kind of set up already. We're already at the gates of that. So he removed them to cities. So this is where they get the idea, is to put us all into like projects, you know, to put black people into these sort of ghettos, the lost sheep of the Beit Israel, into these ghettos. They flipped that script. So now what they fear, that Obama might be like a Joseph, and Obama might be flipping that script. You know, some will say no, but I tell you, it's still a little early to call, right? But we should be prepared all the same. You know what I'm saying? Store up food, store up guns, store up water filters, so forth and so on. He removed them to cities from one end of the borders of Egypt even to the other end thereof. That's like saying from the East Coast to the West Coast. You understand? No more. There's no more East Coast West Coast rivalry right now. You understand? Because famine, you know, brother, can you spare a dime? Only the land of the priests bought he not. You see, only the land that belonged to the priests, he didn't buy the land of the priests. You know what I'm saying? In other words, in the modern equivalency, you know, he didn't buy up what belonged to the bankers. He left the bankers alone because, you know, the priests were too big to fail. You know what I'm saying? The priests were too big to fail. You know what I mean? You could. Can you imagine if the priests, who were like the spiritual bankers, if they failed? For the priests had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh. So Pharaoh gave them a portion, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them. Wherefore they sold not their lands. Right? Their lands were protected. See that churchical? That's what I'm talking about, right? Then Joseph said to the people, behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Lo, look and see. Here is seed for you, and ye shall sow the land. Now you can work the land. Now you can, work the land. That would be good. Back to the land, back to life, back to reality, right? And it shall come to pass in the increase that ye shall give the fifth part to Pharaoh. The fifth part. Remember that fifth part, right? And the fourth part shall be your own. That's not too bad. That's better than sharecropping was for black folks. You know what I'm saying? You understand? You should give the fifth part to Pharaoh, and four parts will belong to the people. For seed of the field, and for your food, and for them of your households, and for food for your little ones. Interesting. Joseph wasn't too bad here. You know what I'm saying? And they said, thou hast saved our lives. You have saved our lives. Well, you see, at least they were grateful. Right? Let us find what grace in the sight of my Lord. Let us find grace in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day that Pharaoh should have the fifth part, except the land of the priest only, which became not Pharaoh's. Yikes, says the author. So according to the Jews, or the Hebrews, or for us, Beit Israel, the Ibrawian, after Joseph forced everyone to lose everything to the central government, it was a famine, don't this guy get it? To gain access to grain, which was collected in the form of taxes, right? This grain was then given back to the people who grew it, but in return, they had to lose all their lands to the ruler and his foreign advisor, Joseph. Yeah. Uh-huh. I mean, they were starving. They don't get this, right? And then became perpetual slaves. You mean bottom rail on top, massa? Even funnier is the part where Joseph couldn't confiscate the lands and taxes handed to the priests. They got to keep everything despite this drought. Actually, the author says this odious story, I say it's ominous, it's like our main story is a lesson to, I think, us there, as he's saying, from his kind of Americans, right? We do need a government to protect us during the inevitable bad years. We know that these bad years come with depressing regularity, and tremendously bad years come in huge waves that takes half a century to gather strength. Many things come in waves of 7 years. For example, some insects follow a 7-year mating schedule. I learned while doing this story that men's ears have a 7-year growth cycle, which is why the size of the ears change over time. How peculiar is that? Look up the article, Rhythmic Ear Growth. Research indicates men's ears grow in 7-year cycles, as well as the article in Engineering News, the stainless steel market and the 7-year cycle. It's all about the so-called mysterious 7-year cycle in metal markets, commodity future trading, and the 30-year cycle. The tops of the cycles are approximately 30 years apart, right? Once the top is pinpointed, we just add 30 years to the top. Every 30 years, the major highs are made and the cycle repeats. Within this 30-year cycle, there are 7 years that produce massive price moves to the upside. So 7 years before the actual top is made, we look for commodity future prices to begin their big moves. Slowly at first, but all the while getting progressively bigger and bigger. And then there's the 7-year property cycle. Could good times be here again for homeowners and residential property investors? Over the past 30 years, there has been a general cycle with house prices rising quickly every 7 to 8 years, which is kind of the difference between the Ethiopian and the Western calendar. The boom years have been 1973 to 74, 81 to 82, 87 to 88, 94 to 95. Based on these figures, 2001 to 02 may be a good year for the residential property sector. One cautionary note, however, each price appreciation had been preceded by a period of inflation. Certainly over the past 2 or 3 years, this has not been the case. We will have to wait and see. Remember, this was actually written in 2009, this article right here, in 2009. Now, there's some other kind of cycles here, and we're not going to go through all of these cycles at this particular time, but it's really very, very interesting. So let's see if we can just get the summary on this when he gets back into something that's more scriptural. Here he says something interesting, that the Jewish or the Hebrew culture, more correctly the Black Hebrew, Afro-Shemitic, you understand, as it's called in true academia, has a big thing for the number 7. Yes, we do. It is the Jubilee or Eol-Belu, right? The Eol-Belu cycle. Every 7th year is what is called sabbatical. You understand? It's called a sabbatical year, right? Saturday, which is the Sabbath or the Shabbat, is the 7th day. Of course, it's the day of rest, right? The day of rest. And every 7 years, which is approximately 49 years, effectively every half a century, is is the Iyol year, the Iyol Amet, where all debts are canceled. Well, that's according to our Hebraic cycle. Unfortunately, you don't have that. Your debts keep building up. You understand, as it were. This is rather peculiar. For we see our government, or the government, the U.S. government, or the shadow government, or the government, and the bankers, and everyone rushing about like mad. It's a rat race to keep the debt payments flowing faultlessly. And they are even rewriting mortgages written less than 3 years ago, all in a vain attempt to keeping the mortgages, which are really mortgages of death, is like a death contract. You understand? Mort, like mortician, mortgages paying back. Indeed, to keep the lending cycle running past the 49-year mark, they are going ZERP, whereby no new loan payments pay any interest at all. This 0% lending cycle is a sign. The ability to soar up more debts has reached its cyclic limits. We have to zero out everything. You see, it's learning this from the scriptures. So the Jubilee was very important in keeping a harmony and not having a system such as we have in this Western Gentile seclurum. We have to zero out everything. Savers are being punished. Savers are being punished. The ones who have money left are running to gold. But we can see from the very ancient story about droughts, this does not work. So, see, they know these things, but they say, buy gold, invest in gold. But you cannot eat gold, right? You know what the gold is? The real gold is the corn, the gold is the wheat, and the gold is the oil. That is the real gold, if you can receive it. That is the edible gold. Now, Pharaoh and his foreign advisor will suck up all the gold, and only then will they hand out the means of survival. At least this is how they hope things go. During this drought, desperate for medicine, desperate for food, desperate for housing, people will give up all of their freedoms and all of their rights and liberties as so-called citizens and actually become modern serfs. I think they are of two minds. They know that. Instead of a jubilee, right, they hope to transfer all the debts to the government. In other words, instead of them having an Iyol, a jubilee, they transfer, well, all of our debts, the government will bail me out, the government itself. And with a fine sleight of hand, convince us that these debts are really assets. That's what they do. They rewrite it, cook in the books, they rewrite it, and call the pulverized glass salt, in other words, right? But these assets really are for them, not for the people, right? These assets are really now taxes on your futures. It's taxes on your futures. And promises that these future taxes will never show up is pure baloney. They say, don't worry about the taxes, extending the bailout for the bankers and the rich, so forth and so on. Note how this 5,000-year-old tale ends. Note this. The people eventually, they have no money. The people eventually have no gold. The people eventually have no livestock. The people eventually have no land. And this is concerning this spiritual Egypt. They are forever serfs, right? Forever slaves, or let's give them the name, their original name, Slavs, right? What is even funnier is that the Jews, right, the Hebrews, they skip forward a tad from this story to the story of Moses. You know, let's just fast forward. In this story, the Hebrews, or the black Jews, are also slaves or bondmen in Egypt. Wow. Isn't it funny? They claim authorship of the system that did this, you understand, talk about the irony. I think this is the cat goddess's revenge. This indeed is the cat goddess's revenge. And in summary here, brothers and sisters, we